I can't be canceled, there's no way that you can stop me. I'm fully independent, there's no label who can drop me. Y'all been starting rumors, let me help you with some. Yeah, y'all can't cancel me. My life is scandal free. There ain't no sponsors taking losses cause the brand is me. My hands are clean, my family and my fans agree. Y'all can't cancel me for facts because you're mad and weak. How's a man say I'm clickbait if he gonna use this face to get clicks on his page? Y'all hypocrites are made. But I ain't tripping about these bullies, it ain't 6th grade. Go ahead and diss me trying to sell a couple mixtapes. I am not playing it safe, I said what I said, it is what it is. I don't care if you mad at me, okay? Go ahead and change the channel. Don't waste your time trying to cancel me, okay? They love me cause they know that I'm it. Say what you want, I guess it is what it is. Haters can talk, but they can't cancel the kid. Go ahead and go off, try and say this is it.
Aaron Tuttle here. It's storm season in Oklahoma, and with that comes torrential rain, high winds, and hail. To protect your home and your family from these threats, the one roofing company you should trust is Ferguson Roof Systems. They've been providing the best in roofing services for nearly half a century. Ferguson is Oklahoma's full-service roofing company, certified with an A+ Better Business Bureau rating and a 5-star rating on Google. And with Ferguson now offering Class 4 impact-resistant shingles, now is the time to trust them with your home's roof. Get started today at FergusonRoofSystems.com. Hey there, Meteorologist Aaron Tuttle here with you on a Monday, and it's about 10 minutes till noon. We're going to talk about what you can expect here for today and see if the severe weather threat has changed any, where it's located, all that jazz. So thanks for tuning in on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live, and also on Twitter Live. And then soon, hopefully probably about a month or so, it'll be Gab Live as well. And that'll be 4 different platforms you can get this information from. I'm running crazy going in circles in this social media world. Is getting a little out of control, man. It's like I'm getting absorbed in the cable 500 channels deal, and I gotta try to reach all 500 channels. It's killing me. All right, we're gonna move on though to the weather discussion here for today. First off, cloudy out there, dreary looking. Got a cold front's already moved through, believe it or not, here in Oklahoma City, and it's moving through other parts of the state. So we're gonna get to the details on that, what you can expect for your severe weather threat. So here's a look at how things ought to play out here for this afternoon. There's a slight risk from the National Weather Service and Storm Prediction Center out across northeast Oklahoma, stretches down to southern Oklahoma, and then back out into northwestern Texas. You can see tornado potential is very low, and this is confined way out in this region, which you'll see in a second. Hail up to baseball size. Yesterday they had golf ball, which I thought was a little low, so they've upped it to baseballs, and then winds of 60 to 80 miles per hour. So the timing on this, eastern, southeastern Oklahoma, large hail to baseball size, 60, 70 mile per hour winds, a tornado or two possible. Down here in southern Oklahoma, looks like just some hail. And then in southwest Oklahoma, hail as well, with probably a little bit of gusty winds out of a storm that'll probably get carried away and move along the Red River, which we discussed last night in depth. And then the tornado potentials we talked about is going to be pretty much from, I think it's closer from Tulsa southward line, but this is kind of in the back end of it in case something were to go early, which I don't think will happen. But regardless, from Ada to Durant, there is your minor tornado threat. Again, nothing expected here over the body of central or western Oklahoma. Now, eastern Oklahoma, obviously is a little bit different story. This is more of a severe weather potential for you guys today. So from 5 to 11 o'clock on the timing here from Tulsa down south, 7 p.m. to 2 a.m., out across this little darker blue shading here in northwest Arkansas, maybe even parts of southwestern Missouri, and then of course southeastern Texas. So you can see here, hail up to baseball size, locally damaging winds, and yes, a few tornadoes are expected as long as we can get some of these supercell storms to develop. And the question, of course, is where and how many? Well, here's a look at the enhanced risk. They have included and updated from last night's from a slight to an enhanced across northwest Arkansas and southeastern Oklahoma, and that jives with the model data that we looked at last night. Tornado potential, you notice here, we haven't seen this at all this year. This is the first time it's not been in a low or very low. It's in a medium potential. So it's just a way to kind of categorize a threat level, meaning forecasters are confident we're going to see a couple of tornadoes. Therefore, they upgrade their thinking to medium. If we were expecting, say, for example, an outbreak of tornadoes, it'd be high. But we're not expecting an outbreak. We are expecting at least a couple to a few. All right, baseball-sized hail to even up maybe softballs, the worst-case scenario, and some damaging winds. So that's kind of your overall generic picture when it comes to these severe weather. When you look at, we'll go ahead and expand this outward. So that severe weather threat actually extends down to south into Dallas-Fort Worth, and then back up north and east toward the rest of northern Arkansas, and then points east from there. And they even had a tornado earlier, I think last time I was live around Mississippi, near Tupelo, that did some damage there. So it is still the season for potential tornadoes. And the tornado threat here, the highest indicated by the Storm Prediction Center here in southeastern Oklahoma, kind of along I-40, and then points south toward into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just on the north side of town. So that little quadrant there in southeast Oklahoma, hence the medium threat for tornadoes. And there's the wind in red, and then there's the hail also in red. So it's a big hail, wind, and tornado potential here this afternoon in southeastern Oklahoma. Now, why is central Oklahoma not really in the mix of all this? Well, we talked about it last night as well. This huge, strong capping layer you see right here on the sounding. This is the temperature profile, and this nudge right here is around 22 degrees Celsius. So the convective temperature it would have to warm up to is 98 degrees to break this cap. Well, that's not going to happen. Now, we'll have the cold front that's moving through, but that's not going to do it either because there's no convergence along the line. So the most you could hope for is eventually with some instability during the day, you get some elevated thunderstorms with a little bit of hail. That's the most I could see, and even last night I really wasn't that excited about it, and I'm still not. But that's on the table here for today. Now, the overall severe weather threat, if we look back at a similar pattern in the analog data, it does favor that big area here outlined, which is what the Storm Prediction Center, if you notice, kind of outlines, matches up pretty close for all severe weather reports. Now, when you break that down to wind, kind of shifts over to the eastern third of Oklahoma and then points eastward from there. When you factor in the hail, again, kind of southeast Oklahoma. There's that little caveat, though. Should an elevated storm here and then down south on the Red River. And then the tornado threat, again, anchored in southeast Oklahoma, even to northern Texas. A little different than the Storm Prediction Center. They kind of continue on the northwestern Arkansas, and I actually kind of agree with them. But again, this isn't going to be... these analogs are cool. They're neat because we can kind of go back in history and try to match things, but no system is ever the same or completely identical. So it's guidance, it's loose guidance, it's not set in stone. Now, we did talk about how the cold front has pressed on through. So we do take a look at that here in the Mesonet map. You can see it does a little something like this. So it's kind of moving through Nowata, up here in northeast Oklahoma, just now starting to push into Tulsa area through Creek County, back out here to Shawnee, and then down just south of Norman. Then it kind of comes down here north of Durant, and then back down south of Lawton in this kind of area here. So that's the position of the cold front, and you're saying, hey, we're on the north side of the cold front, which means, again, no threat for tornadoes here in central Oklahoma. And we're also talking about a surface low. It should be developing somewhere around this vicinity. Is trying to get going now. It'll get a little bit better as the afternoon wears on, and this low will kind of track up kind of in this direction late this afternoon and evening, and that's what will kind of help to focus the severe weather threat primarily along that front, kind of in this quadrant here. So in other words, in the future, to draw this, it would be something like this and something like this. All right. And that may not be necessarily a warm front, maybe more of a stationary line or a cold front that is moving so slow it's almost stationary. But regardless, that should be the surface boundary here for today, which is why this is the favorite area for tornadoes later on this afternoon. And you see temperatures are cooler behind it, but not that much cooler. It's not a huge front. You'll notice it more tomorrow than you do today. So when we do look at the dew point map, this is a measure of moisture in the atmosphere and also gives us the wind direction and the surface low. So as I go through time, this is the latest model data from this morning. And actually, I could pick the very, very latest data. No, that one hadn't come in yet. We'll go the hour before. This model updates every hour as to the latest conditions and feeds them in. So by 5 o'clock, let's see, maybe we'll just go to 6. We'll go to 6 o'clock just because. So it's got that little surface low. Looks like there's a little bit of a low here, but there's actually a stronger low now developing down in North Texas. So every run I've noticed, it keeps shoving the low farther south as far as the significant aspect of it. but it keeps the trailing front, still in that area. What did I just do? No, I didn't want to do that. Close that off. Here we go. So it still keeps the front in this area here in eastern Oklahoma is the good boundary to focus on. Okay, so now let's take a look at how the model thinks the precipitation will develop for the rest of today. Now, I have not looked at this one. This is the brand new run, so we'll see how it differs from the run I saw earlier this morning. But here's what it does. By 7 o'clock, it forms the storms we talked about last night out here in southern Texas Panhandle. These will drift eastward along the northern counties of Texas, and probably one of them cross over Red River. And then we've got these storms that develop along the cold front out here in eastern Oklahoma from really Muskogee to McAllister downward Ardmore. That's the favored area of development, and that's hence where the tornado threat starts. As we go through time, though, you see those storms do develop 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. You do see some development back behind the front. So this would be some elevated thunderstorms with the hail potential located within them around the late evening hours. So keep that in mind. This is kind of a new development. Models had not done that in prior runs. There's that big beast of a supercell down here in North Texas. Prior runs had it crossing the Red River before it reached, say, the Ardmore area. So just in case it's still off by a few miles, you see how close it is. You'll know if it's crossing Red River. Just take a look at radar and use my weather app, AT's Weather to Go, to give you an update as to whether or not you've got a dangerous storm approaching. But as we hit to midnight hour, most of these storms in southeast Oklahoma have moved into Arkansas. The leftover remnants and wraparound still continues into northeast Oklahoma. And that storm starts to die out because it runs into that more stable air here in southeast Oklahoma after 2 o'clock in the morning. But it should be proficient hail producer along the way. And because this event also impacts western Arkansas and North Texas, I'll take a look at those here in just a second. So if you guys are watching me from down there, you'll be able to see what's going on. Also, let's take a look at the latest tech model, and we'll see what it's doing, if it's come in yet. It's still working on it. It's got the storms way out here in northwestern Texas. By 6 o'clock, it's starting to develop some stuff here in southeast Oklahoma. So we'll see what it does here over the next few minutes, see if I can get another panel to come in. But it's kind of jives with the prior. So, tell you what we're going to do. Let's plot a forecast sounding for this area of the state. I'll pick 8 p.m. Just to show you something here. And you can see how the shear changes from the surface aloft. The shear as it turns with height. It starts out the east-southeast direction, and it turns to a south, and then a southwest, and then a westerly direction. That's what we call staircasing. It's like going up on a staircase. And that staircasing motion is the twisting in the atmosphere to get those storms to rotate to produce tornadoes. So it's in the favored supercell, classic supercell configuration. There are a little bit of weaknesses in the wind field at certain areas, but I don't think it'll be enough to stop tornadoes from forming. K values are well excess of 3,000 joules, which is plenty. There's very little cap at all at this point in time in the game for later in the evening. And tornado potential, it's going a little on the higher end of an EF2, possibly EF3 potential tornado. This is just a forecasted guess. It does not mean reality will occur that way. It's more of an indication of the amount of parameters that you can do a checkoff list, right? The more you can check off, the more intense potential there is in the environment to produce a more of a significant tornado. So pay attention to any tornadoes that do form down across southeast Oklahoma later today. Now, this is just based off the HER model, which is decent. Doesn't mean it's completely reality, but it'll be close. There'll be some discrepancies. So, for example, we talked about how Tulsa, I just didn't foresee you guys in the tornado threat, but if you notice later on, it puts you in a hail threat. If I were to back this out, this is at 10 o'clock at night. So it looks like it's got a little bit of a hail marking producer on it. So, yeah, the sounding is chaotic, and the wind field, believe it or not, will cause a very good, strong rotational storm. It's just not a good tornadic type signature. Because you are kind of back in the cooler air, but it does have some hail sizes up around a golf ball size to 2 inches, maybe even tennis ball size in your area. So you could get some big hail in Tulsa again later this evening, and then that's pretty much all for the eastern quarter of Oklahoma. All right, so let's move on into Arkansas, and let's do Dallas, and then we'll wrap things up. So on the Arkansas mode, remember it's going to be a late show for you. So we'll go here through time. So here you can see those storms coming on into the western parts of the state at midnight. And a lot of these will be hail producers, and there likely still be a couple of tornadoes, or at least a tornado at this point in time in the evening. And anywhere is fair game along this line for that short period of time. There's 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's 2 o'clock in the morning. And you see it's kind of congealed into a cluster, more of an MCS, which is a mesoscale convective system or complex. When that happens, the tornado threat greatly reduces. You get more of still some damaging winds and hail with that for the rest of the overnight hours. There's 3 o'clock in the morning, there's 4 o'clock in the morning. It moves through the rest of Arkansas. So you'll likely still probably have to deal with at least a tornado threat early on, but it's not like it is in eastern Oklahoma. So don't get too afraid. Don't be too scared about it. Just keep it in mind. It is a potential down there. All right, let's go to Dallas-Fort Worth in North Texas, and we'll see how that shapes up. So a couple of supercells down here near the Metroplex at 7 o'clock, southwest of town. That's a big one. If we were to forecast or plot a forecast sounding for that, it is also favorable for a tornado, hence the Storm Prediction Center keeping that higher tornado risk down close to the Metroplex. It's also off the chart with significant hail up to grapefruit size, and the storm significant tornado parameters factored in. In other words, all the basket of indices has gone through the roof. So it's saying potential for an EF4 tornado. So in other words, potential for a very strong tornado down there into North Texas. So the question, of course, is where exactly those storms form. Now, this is some model output. It's a generalized area. In other words, this storm here could easily form here, and this storm here could easily be here. So it's a general idea. It's not going to be exact, but it's in the ballpark region where you live. You're going to have to pay attention. All right, so we go through this in time: 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. You can see how those things roll through. So it's going to be a bumpy ride down there in North Texas. And then it starts to congeal and move more into a squall line development at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. So the tornado threat isn't that long. It's from basically a 5 to 9 p.m. window. And then at 10 o'clock onward, it starts to go more of a transition to a squall line. Now you can sometimes get what we call a QLCS tornado along the leading edge of the squall line. But it won't be a supercell type, which means they're not strong usually. And they're very hard to find and forecast and see on radar anyways. And then the line weakens, looks like by midnight. So it's a transition to a weaker event with time there in northeast Texas. And then there's that big hail producer just going nuts at midnight here in North Texas. I'm going to sample the environment ahead of this one just to see what's coming into. So the reason why, it's funny, it says marginal severe. So what happens is it's got a northeast wind, man goodness, up at, it's 1,000 meters up before it finally turns to a south wind here. So you basically kind of start the atmosphere here versus at the bottom. And you start the atmosphere here, and as you work up, you have a little bit of elevated instability. So a little bit of elevated cape that we call it. And that's what's going to keep that storm going. And the rest of the analog, or the rest of the parameters don't match up because it's not a surface-based storm, but the models are hell-bent on keeping it going. So that would be a big hail producer there at midnight. And then you see it does cross the Red River there north of Sherman. Earlier models had it doing more of something like this kind of a deal. So now they've kind of shifted it down here by a county or two. Again, don't take that as gospel because it's just the general area. But you can see it does cross over into the state, and then it does start to weaken quite rapidly because it comes into this area here, which has been overworked by severe weather earlier in the evening, and that causes stabilization. So that's some good news. You won't get whacked twice with the big hail with this secondary line that comes in around 3 o'clock in the morning for you guys. So that's how that looks, and you see clear in Dallas once you get past, I think it was about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock this evening. All right, let's go back to the tech one more time. Let's just take a look. Again, this model's fresh and new, and it's just come in, so I just like to look at it before I sign off here and see if anything's changed. All right. Oh, slow, so slow. It does have the little bubblings of storms signature down here in North Texas and then southeast Oklahoma by 7 o'clock, so it's a little late at developing storms. But in prior runs, it did that, so I'm going to go ahead and go look at a prior run and see how it looked. So see what it did. It's same idea, but it's a little bit more to the east. So it's focused its development here in these favored regions, and then in this favored region just east of Dallas-Fort Worth, whereas the newer runs are kind of backing this up to this region here and this region here. So I like this look, but backed up, which matches the other model I just showed you, which is what we'll just stick with for this forecast. Temperature-wise, chilly. I mean, chilly Wednesday morning, 44 degrees, but the daytime highs back in the 70s as we had for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Brief warm-up there on Saturday, some severe weather possible on Saturday. We can take a quick look at that here before I go. The wide 70s return after that front moves on through. But tomorrow will be quite chilly in general compared to what we normally see. 64 degrees for a high here in Oklahoma City. Your results will vary, and I suggest you use my weather app, AT's Weather to Go. It'll tell you your high, your low, your wind speeds, cloud cover, rain percentage, all that kind of stuff. For any of your daily needs, do that. And then check in with me when it comes to the big ticket items as far as what you can expect and things to watch for. All right, so let's see. We also mentioned in the forecast yesterday that Wednesday could have some storms that roll through northern Oklahoma and before they kind of fall apart. So let's take a look to see how the newest model looks at that potential. So the newest, some of the data actually, this isn't, I looked at another model earlier and it still had them in this vicinity here, and then this one actually has it now in eastern Texas Panhandle. So it's something we're going to have to work out. It's going to be a little difficult for now. Tomorrow will be a lot more clear as the general area, but prior models all had it roughly in this quadrant of the state. So we'll see if this new trend takes off or if it's a no, that's not going to happen. All right, so that's for late Wednesday. And if I were to plot a forecast sounding out ahead of that, just to kind of get an idea of the atmosphere, these are very high base. So lifting cloud level is so far up there you couldn't even touch it if you wanted to. In other words, these are high base storms and they're weak. They've got hardly any cape to work with, so not too worried about those, and they should diminish pretty close to sunset. They won't be short. They will be short-lived. Okay, so let's go to Saturday, and we'll see what the latest surface looks like for Saturday and any potential storms that we may have. So let's see. There's Thursday, Friday, because Saturday's the next. Okay, so this. And I mentioned in my blog how it's going to be very difficult to pick the exact day because the upper pattern is changing dramatically, and the models are going to have a tough time at timing issues while this transition occurs. So here's another prime example where this is new. It's got some storms here for Friday evening. They kind of fall apart though in northwest Oklahoma, and then we'll see what happens on Saturday. It didn't do anything for Saturday, so it's actually a day earlier than prior data. Let's take a look at, you know what I'm going to do, just to see here real quick, a couple things. We'll look at the surface map for both of those days. So this is, let's go to Friday. Friday, 4 p.m. Okay, so these will just be some storms that form, if they even do, here in western Kansas. There's a little weak dry line up here that may get a couple of those storms to go. On Saturday, in prior data, there was a much better indication of a dry line set up out here in western Oklahoma. It's a little wishy-washy. Winds are chaotic. Deep moisture is out here across this part of the state versus the western third of the state. So it's not all set in stone as to what's going to happen there. So let's, as to the American model, we'll take a quick look here at the European and see what it seems to jive with on both of those accounts. So let's go Friday, 7 p.m. Same idea. There's a weak developing dry line out here in western Kansas, but there's very little convergence along it, so I'm not very excited about the potential for Friday at this point. It could change. We're several days away, but right now, weak signal. And then on Saturday, let's see, 7 o'clock. So deep moisture here in central Oklahoma. And this is more like it. There's a surface low here, and we have a dry line bulge here. And then we have what would be kind of a weak frontal band kind of in this area here. So, and it's kind of split. Looks like we've got a dual, this is a complicated mess. When these surface patterns get messy like this, it makes it forecasting a nightmare just because it's not standard textbook, and then Models have a tough time resolving it, and then you just know there's scattered showers and storms, and then it's just hard to pick out some of the more details I really like to give given certain conditions. But usually on a dryline bulge like this is a favorite area for storm initiation. You do see an enhancement of humidity in that area. So on Saturday afternoon, it looks like the potential could be some storms developing out here into west Oklahoma. Then those will move to the east. Whether or not, they're strong, weak, who knows. The forecast sounding for this isn't all that impressive. It's still quite dry. So usually when you have a very dry forecast sounding, it's more of a damaging wind event. So kind of a straight line winds and collapsing thunderstorm cells. So that's not a tornado look to it at all. So just so you know, so far, at this point in time of the game, there's no tornado signature for any of this in the data. Moisture starved situation, but needless to say, an upper disturbance. So we'll see. There's still several days between now and then for those things to kind of change and work themselves out. But I want to give you kind of a heads up on all that. All right, so I also appreciate you guys sending me the stars today on Facebook. Pamela, Leslie, I see you. Jessica, Lisa, appreciate you ladies. Jay, sending me some stars. Roger in the house. Janine, thank you very much. Amy, Ashley, Danielle, appreciate you. Diana, Sharon's in the house with some stars, so appreciate the stars love on Facebook. You can do kind of a similar type deal with YouTube with Super Chat and some other options they give you for your creators that you follow. But there's Jody in the house pumping AT's weather to go. I see you, Anita. I see you, Samantha, getting in there at the last minute. Thank you, ladies. So I hope you enjoyed this forecast, the coverage for it. I'm going to have to get back to work, but I do plan on covering these tornadic storms this evening in southeast Oklahoma. So assuming that they develop, and I have no reason to think why they won't down there. So I'll keep an eye on that for you, and I'll cut in once that happens, and I'll track them as they head into western Arkansas during the late evening hour. So that's my plan for now. So if you do know family and relatives in southeastern and eastern Oklahoma, make sure you let them know that they can watch my live streaming coverage either on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter to get the information they need to stay safe, and make sure they have my weather app. It'll predict those tornadoes before they develop. Okay, that is it for me. You guys have been great. Thanks as always. I see you, Megan, Samantha, Anita. You guys have a great day, great rest of your afternoon, and some of you I will see later this evening. Take care.